Hey adventurers, welcome to the Gorgon Raid Quick Guide for Beginners. I promise you the raid is much easier than you've seen or heard. All you need is some practice and some know-how. Here you will learn all of the basics you need to successfully complete Hive of Gorgon 10-man raid. Together we will go over the requirements, puzzles and boss mechanics that wipe most groups. It's important to note here that there are many strategies for Gorgon. That said, our approach will be very beginner friendly. Without further ado, let's check the basic requirements. First up, gear score. It is recommended for 690 plus gear score for a smoother run. However, gear score itself is secondary to perks though, which means that your abilities and survivability are greatly amplified when you have your build specific perks on your weapons and armor. I'll put some build links in the video description and also feel free to ask any advice in the comments section as well. Next thing you need is to have 3 houses in any region for your trophies. Aim to get 3 major Angry Earth trophies, 1 to each house, for 15% extra damage. If you can't afford major trophies, then get the basic ones for 12% extra damage, because it is absolutely crucial you fulfill this requirement, since the second boss here is a DPS check. So you will absolutely need that increased damage output in order to succeed more easily. In addition to that, you are going to need some consumables to increase your damage output and mitigation. You're going to have to use infused Angry Earth coatings for extra damage. And for damage absorption, we're going to need Angry Earth ward potions. To increase our damage output even further, we're going to need powerful honing stones. And in addition to that, it wouldn't hurt to use a Desert Sunrise to reduce damage over time duration and to provide you a small amount of passive heal. Top it all off with plus 48 attribute food and you're good to go. Standard raid composition consists of 1 tank, 2 healers and 7 DPS. In order to have a good chance of clearing the raid without any major problems, your team will need to provide rend against enemies. This ensures that your entire team does more damage. In a nutshell, that means that your tank should have a warhammer and a sword, a healer should have a life taker, one of the DPS players should be a complete rend bot, while the other DPS players should have a secondary rend weapon like a spear or an ice gauntlet. Once in the raid, you will be killing lots of Angry Earth mobs up until the first puzzle. Until then, it is straightforward room clearing. Welcome to the first puzzle, the Pillars of Sight. Completing this will open the door to Echidna's lair. Start by clearing out 2 waves of mobs. Once cleared, 2 DPS players have to stand on platforms at the same time to activate the rotating pillars with yellow orbs. Tanks should grab the aggro of the spiders in the room, and other DPS should shoot the moving yellow orbs to turn them green. Once all orbs are green, the door to the first boss will open and you can continue with the raid. As this guide is beginner friendly, I recommend DPS players to use a ranged weapon. Our first boss, Echidna, has 2 phases, from 100 to 50% and 50 to 0%. I recommend beginners to set up like shown on this map. Tanks should hold the boss to the right side of the arena while DPS stays on the left side. Try to make your healer's life easier and stay close to each other for oblivion and healing. Make sure to use your skill shots and heavy attacks, as Echidna has a large stamina bar that you will need to break. Time to go over the mechanics. First mechanic is rock pillars. As a ranged DPS, you will do more stamina damage on the pillar, so stay in the rumbling area to get elevated. When the pillar launches up, you will take strike damage, so keep an eye on your health. There are 2 scenarios where you need to get off the pillars or you will die. Pillars will explode after being hit with crystals or during the boss's scream mechanic. In both cases, you will notice the pillar turning bright white. That will be your warning to jump off. Second mechanic is the crystals. The safest play is to always destroy them. If they are not destroyed during phase 1, they will spawn vines, blocking area and doing damage around it. In phase 2, when Echidna screams, the crystals will explode. This causes arena-wide damage and in most cases results in a team wipe. The third mechanic is the scream. Once you get the boss down to 50% HP, phase 2 begins and Echidna stands and screams, destroying all pillars and crystals. This would be the time to get close to pump some melee damage. After the scream, boss will spawn new set of crystals, which you need to kill immediately. Fourth mechanic of Echidna are the jumps. In phase 2, after spawning crystals, the boss will jump on a random player, doing a lot of AoE damage when landing. Echidna will choose a player, and the player will have a marker above their character indicating that they're about to get jumped. In the first jump mechanic, the boss will jump 4 times on random players, whereas the last jump will always be back on the tank. The jumps have a large dodge window, so try to dodge before the boss lands on you or someone close to you. In the jumping phase, pay attention to crystals, as you don't want to dodge towards them in case they spawn vines. Overall, this boss can take some attempts getting used to with its 4 mechanics, but I'm sure you'll learn it pretty fast. After Echidna has been defeated, it's time to head towards the next puzzle room. This time you will meet slightly stronger Angry Earth mobs on the way to the puzzle room, but it's casual clearing. Welcome to the Medusa Maze. Similarly to previous puzzle, this one also has pressure platforms. There are 2 Medusas roaming around, casting their stony gaze on anyone they see, and if a player gets hit, they turn into a stone and die. Assign 1 to 2 players to kite the Medusas in the middle of the maze, and the rest of the group should clear the 3 platform areas shown on the map, one by one, each time leaving 2 DPS players on the platforms after the area has been cleared. Once all of these 6 platforms have been activated, the door to the next room will open, and the raid can move towards Typhon, the second boss. Typhon is the most difficult part of the entire raid for most raid groups. There are multiple deadly mechanics, and RNG can compromise an attempt that otherwise would have been successful. Typhon is a strong DPS check. This means that buffs have to be up, raids should be DPSing at every opportunity, including healers, and nobody should be using ranged weapons, as melee beats range damage every day of the week here. Typhon has 3 phases, and in order to advance to the next phase, you must get his health down to the percentages shown on the screen. Phases are mechanically similar, but get increasingly more difficult as the fight progresses. That's because with each following phase, your group will have less pillars to use, and Typhon will get stronger if adds he spawned have not been killed fast enough. Since I've already mentioned pillars and adds, let's take a look at all of the boss mechanics. First thing is Lane of Thorns. Imagine the arena is split into 3 equal parts, left, middle and right. 1/3 of the arena will be covered in thorns after 10 seconds, killing you easily if you're caught in it. Move together with your raid away from the affected area and continue damaging the boss. Second mechanic is moving thorns or spikes. If you see a red circle, then it's time to move away. Spikes do 3 instances of AoE damage every few seconds. As for the third mechanic, Typhon will spawn adds, Corvids, wolves and spiders. DPS should immediately kill the Corvids first, then wolves, and ignore the spiders. If Corvids and wolves are not killed, the boss will absorb them with his life leech mechanic. For every Corvid alive, the boss will get a stack of Empower, and for every wolf, a stronger life leech. Typhon is far more dangerous with Corvid stacks, so remember to always kill Corvids first. Fourth mechanic is the eyes, which always comes after the adds phase. Boss marks a random player with evil eyes. If the player does not make it behind a pillar, the boss will charge and kill the player instantly, without an option for revival. Let's do a little recap of the 4 core mechanics once more. First thing was the Lane of Thorns, which blocks 1/3 of the arena and causes a lot of damage. Secondly, spikes. If you notice a red circle, it's time to move. As for the third mechanic, when Typhon spawns adds, then DPS should always focus Corvids first and then wolves. Ignoring and or failing to kill these adds will make Typhon significantly stronger, and progressing through the phases will likely become a lot more difficult. After the adds phase, the boss will do the eyes mechanic. Make sure you have a pillar close by in case you need to go behind it, as that will be the only thing saving you from Typhon's charge. Typhon also has a few smaller mechanics like 360 slash, which can be reposted or dodged, and occasionally the boss will do a Thorn Maiden strike, during which he will wind up a strike causing players in the strike direction to be locked into thorns, which have to be killed. Typhon also has a jump mechanic where he winds up a jump that will AoE stun and cause waved AoE damage when landing. That can also be easily reposted or dodged. Once your raid has managed to defeat Typhon, keep on moving together with the group and clear the mobs at the next checkpoint. After that, continue clearing forward until reaching a door covered in vines. Behind it, lies the Poison Puzzle. This is the final puzzle and will introduce your raid group to the cleansing mechanic. Your team will need to do some coordinated cleansing in the final boss room. If you have a nature protection amulet or gems, then now would be the time for those. In Cleansing Room, your group starts by throwing water from the first fountain to the following fountain on the left and clumps up there, while the tank aggroes the monsters. Proceed by cleansing the area at the tank and or DPS while killing the mobs. Focus on survivability since you cannot enter the arena once dead and tapped out. Once you've killed the mobs and cleansed the arena, split into 2 equal groups and proceed through the doors by clearing the monsters and activating the levers to open the gates for the other group. Eventually your groups will meet up at the top to put your skills to the test for one final time. Hive of Gorgons is almost completed, and the only thing left to do is to defeat the Broodmother Medusa. This encounter has some key things we need to cover, so firstly let's go over the positioning and team composition. Broodmother Arena has 4 fountains. Raid members will use the fountains to cleanse each other from poison. An optimal beginner-friendly positioning will have the tank holding boss aggro at one of the 2 fountains on the further side of the arena, while DPS rotates to be on the opposite side for maximum safety. The tank healer will always stay near the closest fountain to the tank and will rotate fountains if necessary. DPS healer should stay in the clump with DPS, spamming Oblivion and Rupture. Ideally, the DPS healer will switch to a ranged main and use Life Taker for Oblivion, Rupture and boss rend. Rupture should provide enough healing for DPS, so a secondary life staff is really not needed. For the team composition, your raid will need at least 2 DPS with a secondary slash weapon to destroy the eggs that boss spawns. These players will be on egg duty, which we will cover with the mechanics. Let's go over the cleansing. As a tank, you're responsible for cleansing yourself. If you have a dot on you and you see your health dropping, pick up the water from the fountain and throw it at the wall behind you. Slowly back into the wall to cleanse. If the fountain is on cooldown and you don't have access to water, rotate to another fountain or request for a cleanse from the tank healer. As a DPS, your group should have a designated cleanse guy who will monitor the group and cleanse when required. Since you're all clumped up, you should never need more than 1 cleansing water pool. If you do not have a designated cleanser, cleanse the DPS clump when you need it. As a tank healer, you are responsible for cleansing yourself, the tank, and the egg-duty DPS if they get in trouble or stoned by the smoke. Let's talk about the eggs. Broodmother will spit eggs from time to time around the arena that will spawn powerful mobs if they are not killed. You need to have slash damage for eggs. This is why we have at least 2 designated egg duty DPS players with a slash secondary weapon. Most commonly greatsword or a hatchet. Egg duty players will switch from boss damage to eggs whenever the eggs spawn, and rest of the DPS players should focus on damaging the boss. And now we will go over the flowers, the deadliest part of Broodmother Medusa room. The 3 flower buds hanging from the ceiling will bloom or open and drop poisonous AoE damage in the form of vines on the ground, and also smoke. Any person standing in the smoke will start receiving stacks of its debuff, and when reaching 10 stacks your character falls asleep and needs to be cleansed. If you see the flowers bloom, DPS priority will change from boss to the flowers until all 3 have closed again. Next thing I want to talk about is vines. Once the boss is down to 40% health, the vines will appear on all fountains, which blocks the access to cleansing water. DPS players have a responsibility to focus and destroy vines immediately to enable access to cleansing water. Without the timely possibility to cleanse, the situation might snowball out of hand very quickly, and by the time you know it, you're already past the point of recovery. Pay attention, as the vines will appear again later and have to be removed as soon as possible. The final thing we have to pay attention to is charge. If Broodmother Medusa comes in contact with cleansing water, she will charge across the arena, killing everyone who will stay in her way. She will also start randomly charging from time to time when she has less than 40% HP. She will face the direction of her charge, stand up, scream, and charge, giving players targeted around 3 to 5 seconds to react. Final wise words would be that understanding and executing mechanics is far more important than raw damage output. You do less DPS when you are dead. Thank you for tuning in, hope this helps you, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.